7 October, Hamas invaded Israel, and then the whole Gaza thing blew up, and it's just been off to the races ever since. And so we're taking tools that we were optimizing via operational experimentation in the AOR, which is unique because it's a real environment, real threat, real partners, real consequences if you don't get it right. But suddenly, hyper-focus now on Israel.
I don't think I'd drawn the parallel between like the transferability of COVID learnings and the sort of real quick sort of diaspora of everyone out of the building.
That's right.
And then being able to then apply that to a scenario like Ukraine where, there's not a bunch of fiber already pulled and there's not some pre-existing boxes. That's really interesting.
Right. So it forced us out of our comfort zone, which is good because if you look at the threat and the increased risk of ballistic missiles and our ability to come together in large operation centers, whether that's in the AOR, whether, just look at experience at JRTC or NTC at the tactical level, brigade headquarters getting smoked, you've got to disaggregate. In order to disaggregate, you still need the data, and commanders still need to be able to make decisions, which means you've got to get comfortable moving into the cloud. Yep. And if you have the cloud, it's only good if you have kind of the ability to touch the cloud at the lowest tactical level. And so that that in order to do that, you also need you need edge compute. And so small form factor stuff that can go in the back of a Humvee that can allow commanders to get up on the net together. Because at the end of the day, it's all about communication. It's a human endeavor. Yeah. Commanders have to give guidance. They have to hear refinement from their subordinate commanders. And we need the tech to enable that type of conversation to have, that commander's dialogue.
It can't just be that vertical integration.
That's right.
Where, me as a team leader can give you as a commander, a little bit of situational awareness, but I can't give any of my sort of sister team leaders the same type of SA. We're not able to share horizontally.
That's right.
I think that's been one of those things that we've seen out of COVID, DOD and in the IC, but then also as you look at some of the unique uses of maybe commercial technology on the ground in Ukraine, you've seen way more sort of shared situational awareness, limited information asymmetry at the tactical edge, which I think is, at least for my experience, is like a platoon leader and company grade officer. That is a new thing. You usually had no information at the tactical edge.
And interestingly, when I was working for General Krillo, when he was the Ranger Regimental Commander, he was really focused on soldier lethality and individual soldier ranger situational awareness. And so, every ranger having pelletors, having a squad radio, not just the squad leader, but every single ranger, is a sensor. And every single ranger had the ability to if you see something, to say something and pass that up through the chain or laterally to the others. So, and that really evolved. So equipping the individuals, we're trying to do the same with, our components, with individual aircraft, with ships, so that we have a kind of a single pane of glass, a common operating picture with 150 or so live data streams coming in, where a commander is seeing a 4-star commander in Tampa is seeing the same thing that his 3-star component commander is seeing forward, that his pilots are seeing on their heads up display. So it's pretty wild.
Cultural and organizational change from what it used to be.
Right. And then, if you're going back to the Ukraine thing and just, everybody has an iPhone, right? Yep. So, in Ukraine is a very tech savvy country. So how did we, while we have our own systems for passing target data, they had their own Ukrainian system. And so it was the ability to make those two things talk, so we could digitally pass points of interest via AFATEDs, which is our targeting box, to their unique solution via cross-domain solution. And because there was necessity and a sense of urgency, it allowed us to work through a lot of the bureaucratic hurdles at record pace. So that kind of really accelerated this digital warfighting transformation. General Krillo then passed on to General Donahue, who stepped up and led the Corps, and just, again, it's like a rocket ship with multi-stage booster rockets. He just took it to the next level.
And what a 1-2 punch that is.
Oh my gosh,
Holy cow.
Yeah, and they're still doing it. And then General Krillo comes to CentCom and gives that very similar guidance to a combatant command that had been around for 40 years and had done things for pretty consistently for the last 20 or so of the GWAT. And he came in and shook it up and said, hey, we're going to be a data-centric warfighting headquarters. We're not just going to sit back and watch components fight. We are going to be a warfighting headquarters, and we're putting data forward, and we're going to create this shared situational understanding. And it's just been off to the races. And so you're taking, when you came in, we set up a series of exercises, these 90-day capability sprints like we were doing at the 18th Airborne Corps, and we did that for about a year until 7 October. When Hamas invaded Israel, and then the whole Gaza thing blew up, and it's just been off to the races ever since. And so we're taking tools that we were optimizing for via operational experimentation in the AOR, which is unique because it's a real environment, real threat, real partners, real consequences if you don't get it right. But suddenly, hyper focus now on Israel, and that's became part of a larger conflict as the Iranian affiliated militia groups out of sympathy, Iran-backed militias are now so you have Iraq, Syria, and then the Houthi problem in Yemen. So we're using these tools in a way that we've never used them, and the learning again is just like hyper accelerated because of the operational necessity. So
I think it's two questions coming out of that, and I know everyone will have heard this at the beginning, but I will continue to remind this is not the official position of CentCom or the DoD or the military.
Thank you for reminding the audience. I can't be trusted to speak on behalf of the department.
I'll keep this one going. When we actually roll this, maybe there'll just be a sign.
Yeah.
But you talk about using things in a way that maybe we hadn't before or they weren't envisioned. So there's a question on transferability, right? So the things you're learning. Are you seeing sort of high transferability to other, geographic combatant commands or sort of warfighting units?
Absolutely.
And then on that, how are you continuing to sort of sense the broader sort of capability landscape for, hey, what might we need next or what might we need to lean into? And then how have you changed that approach based on the fact that sort of the operational environment has, almost done a 180.
Yeah. So I'll do the first question about transferability. So everyone's aware of our national defense strategy and kind of, whereas CentCom 10 years ago was kind of the top of the list in global war on terror. If you look at just the amount of hardware and people that were in the AOR, and then as we've transitioned and we look at China as a pacing threat and Indo-PACOM being, the number besides defending the homeland, Indo-PACOM and then EUCOM, CentCom. So there's been a migration of combat power to other theaters, and all rightfully so. But what we're doing right now to enable warfighting in CentCom absolutely informs and de-risk the ability to warfight in the Pacific theater or in the European theater. Because again, it's about shortening kill chains. It's about having global awareness and being able to balance global risk. Because if you talk about the vertical integration as a COCOM, we're looking up to the Joint Staff who is trying. They're like, okay, CentCom, we understand you have problems, but we're looking at the whole world right now, and there's a lot going on.
Everybody's got problems right now.
Everybody's got problems, right? So while we're trying to deter Iran and do the counter VEO thing and compete strategically, there are other pacing threats out there and things that are happening. And so, but we all share the same need for one. The Joint Staff needs some sort of common framework to understand readiness and then impact to mission as they make global force management decisions. So if you take one crew des from Indo-PACOM and give it to CentCom, then there's an opportunity cost. And what is that cost? What's the cost in readiness, et cetera? Yeah. And then just the ability to target. So digital targeting, shortening kill chains, maintaining custody of targets all the way through the target development process, and doing that as a distributed.
It's such a harder problem than so many people think it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then do it with partners.
Yep.
That may be the biggest challenge.
Yeah,
and we talk about
language, different systems, different fabrics. Yeah.
Yeah. We talk about CJAD C2. Right now, we've got really good JAD C2. The C part, the combined piece, we're still working through, and that's been a priority. And I'll tell you one thing that's really enabled us in having visibility horizontally at other COCOMs is the CDAO office. So the Chief Digital AI office has been a strategic partner for CentCom in terms of They run the global information dominance experiments, which, again, about every 90 days, we synchronize our CentCom exercises, our digital Falcon Oasis exercise, to align with that so that we stimulate their experiment and provide input and work on the tools that we're using at CentCom that are also useful to the Joint Staff. And then we get to see how that's how they're working similar efforts at the other COCOMs. And we're not all using the same tools. So, it's still, I won't call it a competition, but we're using what works for us, but then trying to find what's the overlap, what are the common threads, and then what's the possibility of achieving data integration so that we can be using Maven, they can be using the Joint Fires Network.
Is not bad.
It's healthy.
Right? Those are market forces. Yeah,
exactly. As as an econ major, you would appreciate that, right?
Pay attention.
So it's really been fascinating. Like I said, warfighting is warfighting, and data is data, and the need for speed applies to all theaters. And so I think what we're doing is really advancing the ball for everybody. And like I said, we couldn't do it without these venues to go out there and try these, and without advocacy from CDAO and other partners like NGA that help us continue to experiment.
Yeah. So when you find, like using, whether it's guide or, let's say CDAO finds an interesting piece of technology, maybe it's through trade wins. Mm-hmm. And they pick up the bat phone, they call you down at CentCom. How are you guys creating space to even think about, assessing something new, engaging with, starting to think about design? I mean, that's a pretty material context switch.
Yeah.
In the face of, hey, on one side, this could potentially be useful. On the other side, hey, if I don't do this, lives will be lost.
Yeah. Fortunately, within the last 12 months, we stood up the Chief Technology Office. So Sky Moore and her team, Nate and Brian Sears.
So friggin' sharp.
Yeah, that whole team done rules. A fantastic job. So Sky and I work together on these exercises, the Digital Falcon Oasis series. She's takes lead on the tech perspective. I take the operational lead in terms of synchronizing with exercises and working this into real world operations, into our fires plan and into our fusion cells. But as new tech is introduced, it's kind of easy for me. Then I can refer them to the CTO office. Yeah, fair. And
you built the capability to actually kind of catch that and engage and think about it.
Yep. And then, also we don't have it. The CTO office at CentCom is really tiny. Yeah. It's just a handful of people. So the intent was to push the development and the innovation task forces out to the edge. So we have our 6 components: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, SOCCENT plus Space Cent, the Guardians. But those innovation task forces reside out there with the components. And so we have one with, a land-based kind of task force 39. 59 is our unmanned surface vehicles. 99 is our air component. It's the UAS systems. And then our SOCCENT just stood there. So they can do a lot of that operational experimentation at the edge, using SIBRs and interacting with industry. And they can do it as part of partnered exercises. They can do it unilaterally, whatever. But again, there's no better place to test a new capability than the DoD's
where it's going to be used,
the sandbox, right? I mean, it is the sandbox.
And those test results, is that coming back in? Did I infer that correctly? Like Sky and her team?
Yeah. So we're collecting all that and sharing it broadly with the DoD.
That's awesome.
And so if you look at counter UAS capability,
anecdotally, you'd do a test and you'd keep it vertically oriented, and there was just like a industrial age sort of power, positioning of like, no, this is my program.
Yeah.
So just the act of, 1, consolidating, but 2, diffusing.
Yeah.
That's tremendous.
Yes. And so we're working with the services and the modernization enterprise and everybody else to kind of make sure we're doing things safely. And as we integrate new tech into theater, where people are actually attacking U.S. bases there've been, over 160 attacks since October, and the number every day that just keeps going up, and it's back and forth, and so how are we defending our servicemen and women for overseas, and rapidly bring in the latest and greatest tech in order to give them that that offset and give them that advantage.
Yeah.
So.